Dear teachers, colleagues, and fellow educators, welcome to Publications Back to School Conference. Our key speaker today is Vasileiou.
Hello, hello.
We're all happy to see you all. I hope you are tuning in from a safe place, and I truly hope that you and your family are safe and sound. Thank you for joining us again. At the end of the conference, we will be happy to send you the certificate of participation. So today we're going to talk about how to acquire language skills and life skills with the help of Full Blast Plus for Ukraine. And let me tell you about Full Blast Plus for Ukraine and what can be used as a supplementary material with Full Blast Plus. Full Blast Plus for Ukraine is an easy-to-use and exciting course in English, especially designed for modern teenagers. Full Blast Plus for Ukraine will be delivered to you in online format. And workbooks are being published right now, so they will be on their way to school soon, and you can place your order at the Linguist Company now. Full Blast Plus for Ukraine consists of 8 independent units of exciting and contemporary topics with lively dialogues and where the emphasis is placed on vocabulary building. Each unit contains cross-curricular and cultural information about Ukraine and English-speaking countries. At the end of the book, you will find pair work activities with personalized tasks. At the end of each unit, there is one topic song which will help your students to revise and consolidate grammar and vocabulary of the unit. At the end of the book, you will find a word list where all words are given as they appear in the module with Ukrainian translation and transcripts. Grammar section can be used for reference at the end of the book. The main concern of the writer of the course has been to help students acquire not only language skills, but also 21st century skills such as communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, intercultural awareness, personal and social responsibility, and ICT literacy. Teacher's book is your best guide, so please refer to Teacher's book whenever you are preparing for an English lesson. It contains pages from student's book and a ready-made lesson plan for you with aims, answers to all exercises, listening transcripts, optional ideas, and tasks for fast finishers. Besides, you will also find answers to all exercises from workbook. If you want your students to practice grammar more, you can use Full Blast Plus Grammar Book. It's a specially designed grammar book that will help your students learn grammar and revise all grammatical structures presented in the unit. There are 21 units that follow the syllabus of the student's book. There are not only grammar exercises, you will find speaking and writing activities as well. At the end of each unit, there is a revision section, which will help your students to revise grammar at the end of each unit. Assessment has never been so easy as with Full Blast Plus test booklet. It contains 8 module tests and 1 final test. Besides, you will find grammar tests for each module and 1 final grammar test. If you are interested, please contact the Linguist Company and you can order this test booklet from us. We are happy to provide you with lesson planning for Full Blast Plus for Ukraine for 3.5 hours. Please visit our website, publishing.linguist.ua, where you can download lesson planning for Full Blast. You can also find audio, tests, and video materials for Full Blast Plus for Ukraine by visiting our website. We love to share ideas for English lessons with you, so please don't miss our articles for teachers that appear every month on our Facebook page, Publications Ukraine, and we conduct webinars on a regular basis, and we will be happy to answer all of your questions during our Q&A sessions. Please visit our website, publishing.linguist.ua, where you can find students' book in online format, lesson planning for Full Blast Plus for Ukraine, audio and video materials. Let me remind you that we also have our international website, mmpublications.com, where you can find video for all titles, Full Blast, New Destinations, Pioneer, and Youngstars. And there are two educational games. One is for primary school and the second one is for secondary school. So please check them out and use them in your classroom. Make sure that you have subscribed to our Facebook page, Publications Ukraine. We are here to support you and help you grow and develop professionally. If you want to buy any of Publications books, please contact the Linguist Company. The Linguist Company is the official distributor of Publications books in Ukraine. We also have our regional offices in Lviv, Odessa, Dnipro, and Kharkiv. Our sales managers and consultants will be happy to help you make the right choice of the book. If you have any requests, please contact me. I'll be happy to answer all of your questions, either by phone or on the email. Thank you for your attention. And now it's time to introduce our key speaker today. Christopher Vasileiou is a speaker that needs no introduction, but it's always polite to introduce a speaker. Christopher is a holder of bachelor degree in English literature and master's degree in developmental and learning disabilities. He has been a teacher trainer, and a Publications ELT consultant for many years and worked with different schools and educational institutions. He has traveled around the world to conduct seminars for English teachers, and he's also involved in editorial work. Christopher is going to share his expertise and personal experience on how your students can develop and acquire skills and benefit from active learning in the classroom. Over to you, dear Chris.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you. Thank you for this warm introduction as well. A pleasure to see you. That was my winter edition picture that you saw there. This is a summer edition here, as you can tell. So thank you very much. Let me share my screen in order to get into the presentation right now. And I assume you can now see my screen, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. Thank you for all of you for attending this session as well. Actually, Full Blast Plus is a series that is meant to promote what it is that we're going to be talking about today. And as you can see here, the objective of this talk is to see how we can exploit the material of the course book in order to be able to get into practice what we want from our students to do in class. And that is not just be empty vessels where they're meant to be filled with info that we're going to be supplying them, but to have more control of their learning. And in order to do that, this is what we need to do: help them to acquire those skills by increasing the engagement, encouraging risk-taking, creative thinking, critical thinking, all these things that we talk about and the importance and their contribution to language learning, how they can be exploited through a course book. So this is what active learning probably is all about. Let's see what are some of the key components that have to do with active learning. As you can see, it's more or less like an umbrella term, and underneath its umbrella, what is covered is those collaborative skills, the increased engagement that we want, creativity, risk-taking, and critical thinking, as we mentioned in the objectives that we have of this talk. So I want to ask you, and of course you can Google it, but I wouldn't bother getting my phone out and starting to Google about responding to a simple question like this. I want to see in the chat box, what is it that comes to your mind when you hear about active learning? What is it that you think connects with active learning? It can be a one-word response, a very brief response. I'm going to be having a look at the chat box. There's not necessarily, you don't have to think of a definition. What I want is what comes to your mind. Think about your class, think about specific activities that got students a lot more motivated to speak. It got them really involved in what it is that you were teaching. So if you think about those activities that actually got those students to be a bit more involved, then probably you're on the right track of what active learning is all about. Alexandra says, I think it's an interaction on behalf of the students. And Eugenia also mentions this. No, Daria, it's not disabled because I can see your comment, your response. It's not disabled, so you can fill in your response here. So yeah, basically it is interaction. Hello, everybody. Hello, Oksana. Hello, nice to see all of you back here. And some of those names are familiar from yesterday. Cooperating actively with students, preparing interesting tasks for them to be involved in communicating. Exactly. All these are key components of what active learning is all about. And if you are to scroll down your search regarding what active learning, how it can be defined, it's meant to promote recall and a deeper understanding of material as students are engaging much more, taking control, that is, of the content, and they are not simply listening to the material. This helps to maintain student concentration, and it deepens learning in higher level skills like critical thinking, something that we generally do talk about. You have seen many webinars, been present in many seminars about the importance of critical thinking, even from the very, very early stages, the low levels of English teaching, where we ask critical thinking questions in L1 in order to get them triggered to understand what the story is all about. And then that can pave the way for the new vocabulary to be introduced. So critical thinking plays an important role, even if they have not mastered the language when it comes to the very, very early stages of teaching. So let's see now, if you got your students in your class, how long before, after, I mean, like you start the lesson, okay? So based on your experience, I mean, like as teachers, how long do you think does it take for their attention to start to decline? You have your students greeted in your class, the lesson begins, and I'm pretty sure in the beginning, when they have taken their seat, they're fully attentive, they are concentrating on what it is that you are going to be presenting. So based on some surveys that have been conducted, how many well, hopefully not as little as 10 seconds, right? 120 minutes, okay, 5 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, maximum 15 minutes there. So I would say that more or less a lot of you have gotten it correct. Yes, I've seen that a lot of you, some of you have been are very enthusiastic about your students, or maybe you are able to maintain their enthusiasm and can actually sustain those minutes of attention much more. But the truth is that after 10 minutes of listening to something, students' attendance starts to fall. It starts to decline little by little unless you trigger them with something else, or you change the scene in order to make it much more interesting as a task. That is a problem that has been detected in a lot of the studies, and that is probably what leads to boredom. So this is something that requires our intervention in order to keep this our students' attention as high as possible for longer time. We need to have activity start to kick in. So students need to be physically and mentally involved in class activities and not simply listen in order for us to make sure that they are actually gaining from what it is that we are doing. I mentioned an example that students are not empty vessels with info that is meant to be filled in. And of course, yes, they're not either sponges that soak up all the info that we give them. We assume that students probably remember something because we have taught it, and that students can apply what we have taught, but this is not always the case, as in the example that we mentioned yesterday regarding the writing activities. It requires a lot of personal involvement as well. And this is why a writing activity includes all the other elements to be integrated in order to be able to get the writing activity, give the writing activity a boost and help students to be able to understand what it is that they are learning. So yes, we must include activities with action. And what do we mean by action? Yes, one way of showing action is a lot of movement. In many cases, I have seen, for example, with my students, when it comes to a reading activity, it was quite different when I had them do a reading activity where they would somehow have their books and stand up and give a performance, let's say, of the reading activity, than just simply reading it, rather than just being seated down and doing a reading activity. It would actually make the other students as well pay attention much more lively than they will do otherwise if the students were to be seated. So action means that it requires demonstration, it requires some other skills, and it requires also the teacher herself or himself to be quite active and making use of movements and the entire body in order to show that there is energy to be passed on in class. So what other things does active learning take into consideration apart from the kinesthetics that we are talking below? Well, the truth is that active learning also requires some mental movement. So it's not only a matter of moving the body, it is also activating the brain. And this is where the 4 C's start to kick in when it comes to the main components of those 21st century skills that we have been talking about. This is why activities that trigger critical thinking, that pave the way for creativity, that require students to take advantage of the classroom setting and collaborate and convey their ideas through communication, is a way of making use of the material in such a productive way that it will actually encourage active activity in class and active learning. So in the Full Blast Plus series, the scope and sequence, as you can see here, you will notice that those 21st century competencies are depicted in the icons that are meant to demonstrate what competency is being focused on in every specific module. You will also have, as a teacher, the opportunity to see in the teacher's book which activities are in sync with the specific competence as it is resembled from a specific icon here. Something else that is also very evident and has taken over the ELT world over the last couple of years, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, the pyramid as it is seen here. You can see that this is a set of hierarchical models that are used in order to be able to classify what are the learning objectives for each level. And these learning objectives are leveled according to the complexity, the demand that is of a task, and how and the specificity of this specific task. It is very interesting to see that the lower skills are the ones that require, let's say, more or less thinking outside of the box, like reading and remembering the info of a text that you have read. And as we move on up the pyramid, we see that the students are asked, when we reach number 4, level number 4, for example, to be able to make comparisons, to put the info into categorization. So this goes beyond, because this requires for them to have gone all the way up the levels, to have comprehended the text for sure, in order to be able to have an opinion to share about what it is that they have read. In order to have this opinion, this means that they are able to put it into categories. And of course, moving all the way up the level of the taxonomy and reaching the summit, you are able to create something of your own based on the module that has been included. I always like to see this sometimes even as a reverse way of doing a demonstration of this. That is, doing a lot of the creativity, let's say, even in class, and having the remembering part, the more simple part, let's say, that doesn't require a lot of interaction to be done at home. It's what we can say, let's say, a model of the flipped classroom approach. But this is something different. It goes without saying that Bloom's taxonomy and the levels of complexity are connected also with the learning styles of our students. So for example, we've got the kinesthetic, the reading, the student who's very good with the reading or writing activities, students who are very good with learning info by taking advantage, making use of the images or the auditory. These are the learning styles that are also associated with Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. Now, I'm not gonna get that much into that because this is theory that you have heard, probably some of you have heard before, or you have found a lot of info on that. What I'm gonna be focusing on is how active learning can stimulate brain movement as well, apart from making use of the body and kinesthetics and all that we are talking about through the Full Blast Plus series. So I always say I'm always in favor of activities that promote, that give an advantage, that more or less make sense of why teaching in a classroom is really important and what are the dynamics of a classroom setting and how we can take advantage of the dynamics that a classroom setting can offer. So when it comes to group class discussions, then we are talking about something that is depicted here as well. Students need more and more moments like these, need more and more to work in those, as we have become accustomed through the Zoom platform, let's say, through a physical setting, breakout rooms that they can work on, and working otherwise in stations, in classroom stations. This is very helpful. This is very important due to the fact that it gives them the opportunity to work together on a specific task that you have assigned to the class. And at the same time, it gives them the opportunity to express themselves without having this intimacy of being heard and exposed in front of the entire classroom. This is something which is, I remember a lot of my students on this occasion, in the beginning, they were very skeptical about raising their hand in order to respond to a question in front of the rest of the class, but they were very much into responding or sharing their opinions when the teacher would approach that group or pair of students that you have paired and have gotten them involved in an activity like this. So this is something which is very important. Don't worry, your chat is not disabled. Everything appears when you want to give a response. Don't worry, because I can read it. Okay, just want to make sure that everything works well for you. Thumbs up. So I want you to see now. Okay, this is a sample page from Full Blast Plus. We can see this, that it can be promoted through a lesson. This is a 1 page of a 2-page lesson where the grammar is introduced. There are some activities. There is a listening activity which more or less focuses on something that has to do with communicating the messages of for teenagers and what they have to talk about. We can make the assumption that it's about music here from the musical instruments. And the speaking activity here asks from the students to talk in groups of 4 and complete the table below about yourself and then about other people in your group. Now, this is a perfect example of how the theory that we are talking about can be put into practice in class. What does it require? It requires some time. So you need to schedule, you need to allocate some time for the students here in this occasion to be paired or to be grouped actually in groups of 4 and ask them to fill in this information. This can be done in a very interesting way, and especially it is an opportunity for even the shy students to be involved in activities like this and to speak out. It always worked with me much better when I wouldn't ask the students, especially the ones that were a bit shy, to speak in front of the class. I would ask them in front of their group and then would somehow select some of the, or a group, one of the groups, or some of the students to do a presentation of the entire group and talk about their group. So this is a way of putting into practice what it is that we talk about in theory. Pause for reflection. Now, this is something which is also very important. It probably is the greatest response to, is listening to the question, is listening an active skill? Definitely it is. Definitely it is really important to get students to listen carefully and give time to react or respond outwardly or inwardly and emotionally or intellectually. I find that this is a very important skill when it comes to teaching a communicative activity, because even in a lot of occasions, I always tell my students that part of the assessment when you are doing a speaking activity with another student, let's say, and you're being assessed, is also the way that you react, that you respond to questions that are being asked, or how you are active when your classmate is actually speaking. I always like to place special emphasis on those back channel cues that are always very important and make a conversation sound much more natural. Back channel cues are like those, yeah, I see. That's right. When, without having a lower, let's say, volume of your voice in order not to sound like you're interrupting, but that you are actually boosting and that you are very attentive when the other person is talking to you. This makes the conversation flow. This makes everything sound much more natural. And this is also a lovely way of showing involvement and encouragement when it comes to your students. So reacting and responding to a conversation or to a discussion with a pair of the pair that you have been set up with is always an indication of having a good discussion with other students. It makes sense that group projects are definitely, let's say, the most important thing, the most important activities that you can take advantage of and show a lot of action, interaction, and put into practice what we talk about in theory when it comes to all these. So take a look, for example, at this culture page that we have from Full Blast. The city is familiar, so we secure the background knowledge here. Right, even if some of the students are somewhere else in Ukraine and have never been, let's say the younger ones might have not been to Kiev, they will have some background knowledge about it. So the great advantage of an activity like this is that we secure the background knowledge for the students, and at the same time, we see that this is an activity that requires interaction because the students need to develop something which requires creativity and puts into practice the multiple intelligence theory that we mentioned before. So it's not only about seeing, becoming familiar with the theory, it's trying to see through activities how they can boost the learning of the language and do something which can get the students much more involved, trigger them to do their search about flyers and how they work in marketing, and at the same time, how this can be communicated through the English language. The English language becomes the medium to do a presentation of another city in Ukraine as it is presented here, as the capital city of the country is presented here, making a flyer similar to the one above and presenting it to the class. This is not another writing activity. This is an interactive activity, and we should treat it differently than if we are to compare it to the writing activities. Group evaluations. Now, we talk about the importance of one of the key components of the 21st century competencies is, of course, becoming an autonomous learner and promoting autonomy when it comes to learning. This can be done by allowing students, giving the students the opportunity to evaluate their work. And it's really interesting to see, to get the students even to vote what it is that they liked from the projects that they have been presented. What is it that they liked and what is it that they would add to a specific project if they would not, let's say, group it as a very, very high if they have another selection from the ones that have been projected. This always triggers students to work better, to best their best, and be able to do something interesting. Role playing. Now, this is another way of getting much more action of a simple reading activity. When you have a dialogue, for example, in full blast, I know that in every module, there's at least one. In most occasions, there are two reading texts, which are based on a dialogue, which require students to do a conversation. So instead of having them just listen and read as a take two, this could be transformed into a role play. It is much more motivating for them to see that they are actually taking roles and they are presenting as if doing a sketch before an audience. And actually, as a teacher, you can be a bit creative with all this by assuming that, okay, you're going to be the director right now, and at the end you're going to evaluate their performance in the way that they read out. So it's not actually evaluating the reading itself, it's actually the entire performance in the role play. This can be very triggering for students and make them much more active than just simply in a very passive way, just be seated and read just to check for their pronunciation. It goes a bit more than that. It goes deeper than that because it asks the students to perform. So it's a different it's a different booster. It's different encouragement for them to strive and work a bit better in order to have a good performance than just reading text when it comes to the front of the class. Another thing is visiting sites. And what do we mean with this? It's being able to see that you can get the students to work on these activities by having, let's say, examples from different info that they have gathered through the through their experience of visiting working on different projects and getting them to collaborate on what it is that they have done. Self-assessment, again, it goes, I mean, it's something a bit more personal than the group evaluations that we're talking about. We have seen more or less the now I can sections at the end of the lesson. I know that on many occasions as teachers, we overlook this component. I have actually done in the past a webinar on how we can exploit the now I can section and try to create it as a sort of give the students the opportunity to even sketch their own graphics and see their performance and calculate their performance by rating genuinely. Of course, it requires be true to themselves and provide accurate information. To what extent that this now I can section can be like really a way of communicating something that I would do with my students is once they finish the module of that specific book, I would ask them to try before they tick this, let's say talk about activities I like and don't like, to try to spot go back in the lessons of that specific module and try to identify the activity that actually helped them, talk about the activities that they like or don't like doing, and share one that they that have to do with their likes or don't like, or what they don't like, or talking about the weather and the seasons. Yes, I've learned in this module and in that specific lesson, let's say module 4, lesson B, about the weather and the seasons. So I'm gonna say that my favorite weather conditions are when there is a sunny day, and of course my favorite season is the summer period, and so on. Think, pair, share. Now, this is something which is, to a great extent, in my opinion, connected with projects and what we talked about before. I would link this with what is demonstrated here. It's another way of showing collaboration. In other words, taking advantage of the dynamics of the class, getting students to work together. The thing is that this strategy requires students to think individually about a topic or answer to a question and then share the ideas with their classmates. This is more or less, again, how like a project works. Yes, it is definitely a collaborative activity, but it is also a sum up of the individual thinking that takes place. So this is more or less like an opportunity for students to, I would allocate this somehow in my class. Let's say I devote 5 minutes to a specific task, 10 minutes, let's say. It depends on your time and how much time you can afford to allocate for a specific activity. And you can tell them that, okay, from those 10 minutes, I'm gonna give you the 1 minute to individually think about the topic that I'm raising right now. All of you in your groups, in your pairs, I want you to write down what comes to your mind. After that minute lapses, get into the let's be forward with the second step, which is talking about what you have thought with your pair or with your group and exchange your ideas. So this is like the think, pair, share model can actually work and contribute to a great extent to the main goal, which is the task fulfillment. Again, it goes without saying that it is an opportunity for students to feel more comfortable with sharing their thoughts. It's again a matter of seeing that they are not exposed to the rest of the class. They don't have the fear of losing face in front of their classmates. We know how students are, especially in their adolescence. Okay, so it's much easier for them to feel a bit more comfortable when they start to share their ideas in smaller groups and the teacher approaching that pair or that group in order to talk about and going around the class and collecting info and giving ideas to the different groups. It improves social skills for sure, because it's also about learning how to respect different opinions. This is what is being cultivated through activities like this. And of course, it does improve speaking and listening skills. You will say right now that, of course, on many occasions, when the teacher leaves that group, the problem is that a lot of students go back to speaking in their first language, right? Well, that is true on many occasions. You go around the class, you try to reinforce the practice of English. However, in many occasions, even if you have some of the students going back to talking, let's say in L1, you will still have managed to get them to speak a little bit more in English. It's difficult, it's not easy, it's not something that can happen from one day to the other, but the little chunks of English and more that can be used, then that is what's really helpful. And this is why you should rotate and go around the class and try to prompt them when you notice that they are making use of L1. These pair work activities, for example, here, as you can see, which are speaking activities. Now, it's really difficult to have simultaneously all of the students be in front of the class and present. So you have to pair them and create those breakout rooms, those the classroom breakout, the physical classroom breakout rooms, in order to get them to listen, because this is what's gonna combat the shyness, the fear of being exposed in front of the class that the students will have. So this is also goes hand in hand, and this is what can promote this next element, which is another advantage of a classroom setting, and it has to do with peer teaching, because it goes without saying that as a teacher you cannot be everywhere. This is why sometimes we need to take into account of what will be the synthesis of the groups that we have. We could be having a student in a group or in a pair coupled with a weaker student, or involved in a specific group with weaker students, to have the role more or less, let's say, of the teacher there. That's going to be the prompter, that's going to be the booster of the conversation. So peer teaching is something that can be promoted through activities like this, and of course can make it evident that it's not only a matter of having the good students as peer teachers, it's also about having everyone having their share of contributing something to the class to the level that they can, without feeling that they are going to be ridiculed in the rest of the class. This, as you can see here, is less intimidating because it's not a student sitting in front of the entire class. It is a student sitting in front of 6 of their classmates. So it could be group A and another group B being situated somewhere else, and the teacher carefully paying attention to their presentation, while the other students are probably working on their presentation as well. It's a matter of trying to see what can function better for your class. Again, as teachers, you know your classroom better. I will never stop saying that. Every classroom setting is different, so you know your classroom better and know how you can instruct them to be helpful with all that. And yes, short demonstrations that are followed by class discussions, because this is the feedback that is being collected, and it's very important. So these way you can actually, what you can gain from your students from all this is that they are able to respond to these prompts here. They're able to work how they can make something, how to grow something, how to do an experiment, how to get from a place to place, how to make graphs. These are all activities that are boosting interaction, that are making students not be, let's say, involved only in passive type fill in the blank activities. They require communication. Even if a student has little to contribute in the beginning, that still is some contribution there. When you are asking, let's say, a pair of students that they need to reach a specific destination, how to get from place to place, let's say as example. So it's part of a speaking activity. So it could be something that you can bring in as realistic. Let's say you've got a student who's not that really into speaking in English, but really loves football. So the question is, I'm a tourist and I want to get to that football stadium where that your favorite team is playing. Okay, I want you to guide me and show me around the neighborhood and tell me how can I get there from the place that I have said. This can be the incentive to start and to speak in English, because the main let's say reinforcer in this occasion is the football team, the favorite football team to be described. So it's always about these things. And Full Blast Plus has got activities also included. This is a CLIL subject with another project activity that gets the students to, it triggers demonstration through activities like this project, where it's not a writing activity, simply a writing activity. Is actually about making use, becoming accustomed to reading graphs here, and at the same time completing a question or something which is associated to a great extent with what students are to be doing. So active learning does encourage all these things that we talked about before. It involves visual learning, verbal learning, kinesthetic learning, social learning, and real-time assessment. This can be done through the Full Blast Plus. Full Blast Plus as a series is rich and has can be exploited in many different ways. It's up to you to discover what fits better for your class, but it gives you many opportunities to do so with your students. Let's start off with this first one, which has to do with visual learning. Okay, well, by making use of the video, as you can see here, for example, where instead of just reading the text, you can get them to focus and ask a question as if they were watching a YouTube video. This is bringing a real life element into class. Students tend to watch YouTube videos, so why not make use of a video, ask a warm-up question, get them to focus and to watch the video for a specific reason, and then comment on that. This is bringing a real life element into class. The guessing game here, talk in pairs, look at the pictures and ask questions using the prompt. So it is a speaking activity, but there is an incentive. There is a reason for trying to speak. It's more or less like a game and what it is that they are involved to do. Or an activity like this, like the project that we talked about before. This is another project. Fill the sprayer with water, go outside on a sunny day. So this is about working on a specific experiment. It's not only about understanding and writing an essay and responding to the letter. It requires action, and it is something that can be done outside the classroom setting as well. And you can have your students, let's say, for example, present this, if you are to group them in different groups, in 1-minute videos. Have them create 1-minute videos to see if their experiment actually worked, and deliver it in chunks. 1-minute videos because you want to show as much as you can in class. So put a time frame in that time limit in order to be able to show and comment on all the videos that you will see. This is going to be something very interesting as well. Activities, speaking activities like this, promoting a relaxed atmosphere, having themed festive day, do activities which share personal info. These are all very intriguing for students, and it motivates them to speak in English, because it's also a connection with what it is that they like to do in real life situations. Tools and strategies for gathering data about student learning during a single lesson and responding to that data during that same lesson or at the beginning of the very next class session. It's more or less like what we are talking about when we say the importance of making use of the resources that you have outside the classroom setting, and how they can convey information that they have gathered based on the material of the book. You've got another activity here, for example. Imagine you're on holiday, writes an email to a friend telling him or her using the information. This goes without saying that it is phrases that they can use also in speaking as well. And something that you can wrap up with is, as at the end of every lesson, is asking students at the end of the class to note down what is the most important thing they learned in class today. Give them 60 seconds before they leave just to write down what it is, and pick randomly some students, or on their way out of the classroom, get every student one at a time to share what they learned today and leave the classroom. It can be more or less connected with reflecting on what has been taught. What we must not forget is how we learn. And the truth is that even though reading is very important, we tend to recall, bring back to our minds 10% of what it is that we read. Think about, I mean, like the last time that you read a book, let's say your literature, right? A book that you have not heard anything about the story before. You don't remember every single detail. You remember more or less about, depending on how intriguing the story was, of course, or how your background information on that story. You remember, we tend to remember 10% of what we read, especially when we encounter something for the first time. 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% when there is a combination of seeing and hearing. So this is why videos are very helpful. 70% of what we say, because it involves production, and production means that there has been a lot of this in store in order to be able to have a word on it. And of course, 90% of what we do. So action really is the stimulator to take control of learning. And this is why all these theories are backed up by the surveys that have been conducted, and of course are brought into learning and a modern approach to learning when it comes to environment. So active learning, yes, it definitely should be included. It is always much more helpful than it's another way of teaching, and it's a much more modern approach to teaching for sure than the passive role that teaching a foreign language had in the past. And that's just why all these activities are included in Full Blast Plus as well, in order to boost active learning in class. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to be taking a look at the chat box. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, if there are any questions about Full Blast Plus, Anna is the expert here. She is the person that can respond to questions regarding the purchasing of the material, and all that. If you have any questions that you would like to ask regarding the Full Blast Plus as a series in general, or how anything that you would like to share about your experience with your students with the Full Blast series, you're more than welcome to do so. It was a pleasure to be with you on the second day as well. And as I said yesterday, I hope everything keeps you well, and we'll be more than glad to be able to conduct these sessions from up close and have the opportunity to get a live interaction with you. It's going to be much more definitely appealing to me, and at the same time the fact that it's going to also mean that everything is going to go back to normal for Ukraine as well, and for you there as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for your responses. Thank you. We'll be more than glad to. Thank you very much. Anna, yes.
Thank you, Christopher. It was, as always, interesting and inspiring. Dear teachers, let me remind you that after today's session, you will receive the certificate for yesterday's session and for today's session. Please check your email as well as your junk box, as you may receive the certificate there. So if you have any questions, please contact me. I'll be happy to answer all of them. And I will be also happy to see you next week on my webinar on the 31st of August. This webinar will be dedicated to developing communicative skills with Full Blast Plus for Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I wish you all the best. Stay safe and stay healthy, and goodbye for now.